For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a crisp September morning in 1991, 34-year-old Lucas Edwards set out from his research station on the Mont de Glacier in Chamonix, France. The respected glaciologist from the University of Colorado Boulder was conducting vital climate change research in one of Europe's most treacherous ice fields. He never returned. Despite an extensive search operation led by the French Alpine police across the vast glacier system, Edwards seemed to have vanished into the ancient ice itself. For 25 years, his wife Catherine and the scientific community grappled with the mysterious disappearance of one of their most promising researchers. Then, in 2016, the glacier began to yield its secrets when a perfectly preserved backpack emerged from the melting ice. What lay inside would unravel a web of scientific fraud, corporate corruption, and murder that had remained frozen in time for over 2 decades. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Lucas Edwards. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. On the morning of September 15, 1991, the Mont de Glacier in the French Alps held no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. The sun cast long shadows across the ancient ice as Lucas Edwards made his final recorded radio check from Research Station Delta, his voice clear and methodical as he detailed the day's planned measurements. At 34, Lucas had already established himself as one of the most respected glaciologists in his field. His work tracking glacial retreat patterns had earned him recognition at the University of Colorado Boulder, and his meticulous approach to data collection made him the perfect choice for the sensitive climate research project in Chamonix Valley. The morning began like any other at the research station. Lucas's log entries, later recovered, showed normal temperature readings and standard equipment checks at 6 a.m. He had spoken with his wife Catherine at 7, discussing dinner plans for the following weekend when he was due to return home. The conversation ended with their usual exchange. "Stay warm," she had said. "Always," he replied. By mid-morning, the sophisticated array of measuring devices Lucas had positioned across the glacier was collecting data on ice movement, temperature variations, and core sample analyses. The equipment's digital readouts showed consistent monitoring until 11:43 a.m., when the first anomaly appeared, a sudden interruption in the manual data entry sequence. At 2 p.m., Dr. Vincent Morrow arrived at the research station for a scheduled equipment check. What he found would launch one of the most perplexing disappearances in modern alpine history. The station's instruments were running, coffee still warm in a thermal mug, and Lucas's detailed notes were laid out on his workstation, the last entry stopping mid-sentence. His emergency beacon lay untouched in its charging dock. The initial search began immediately. Alpine rescue teams combed the glacier's surface while helicopters swept the surrounding terrain. The weather had been clear, with excellent visibility and stable conditions. There were no reports of avalanches or significant ice movements. Lucas had simply vanished. Catherine Edwards received the call at her Boulder law office just after midnight local time. "There must be some mistake," she told Inspector Marie Lefebvre. "Lucas never goes off protocol. Never." She boarded the first available flight to France, carrying with her the last photographs they had taken together at their mountain cabin just weeks before. The search expanded over the following days. Teams of experienced mountaineers probed crevasses and scanned the glacier's surface. Thermal imaging equipment revealed nothing beneath the ice. Lucas's colleagues from the research station joined the effort, with Vincent Morrow leading several expeditions into the more technical areas of the glacier system. As the first week drew to a close, the harsh reality of the Alps began to set in. Survival rates dropped dramatically after the first 48 hours, and the glacier, with its labyrinth of crevasses and ice caves, had claimed many lives before. Yet the lack of any physical evidence, no equipment, no traces of an accident left investigators struggling to reconstruct Lucas's final movements. Catherine refused to leave Chamonix, taking up reside, NCE, in a small hotel with a view of the glacier. Each morning, she would watch the sun rise over the ice field where her husband had disappeared, convinced that the glacier held answers yet to be discovered. She couldn't know then that the truth would remain locked in ice for 25 years, preserved in a backpack that contained not just Lucas's final messages, but evidence of a scientific fraud that would shake the foundations of climate research. The disappearance of Lucas Edwards marked the beginning of a mystery that would span decades, its solution finally emerging from the very glacier he had dedicated his life to studying. As the search parties began to withdraw and the case file moved to the growing stack of unsolved alpine disappearances, no one suspected that the truth lay frozen in time, waiting for the warming world Lucas had warned about to reveal its dark secret. Inspector Marie Lefebvre stood at the edge of Research Station Delta, her experienced eyes scanning the vast expanse of the Mont de Glace. 20 years of investigating accidents in the French Alps had taught her that glaciers rarely gave up their secrets easily. The disappearance of Lucas Edwards was already proving to be one of her most puzzling cases. The investigation's first 48 hours revealed a series of contradictions. The research station itself told a story of orderly work suddenly interrupted. Lucas's equipment readings continued logging data hours after his disappearance, suggesting he had intended to return. His laptop contained partially analyzed ice core data, with calculations left unfinished. A half-eaten energy bar sat beside his notes, as though he had stepped away for just a moment. Vincent Moreau's account of that day added another layer of complexity. According to his statement, he had arrived for their scheduled equipment check to find the station deserted. Lucas was meticulous about timing, Moreau told Lefebvre during his initial interview. When I saw his coffee still warm, I knew something was wrong. He would never leave the station unattended during active data collection. The search patterns expanded systematically across the glacier system. Teams worked in grid formations, using ground-penetrating radar to detect any anomalies beneath the ice. The weather remained unusually cooperative, with clear skies and stable conditions allowing for thorough coverage of the search area. Yet each day ended without a single significant finding. Most perplexing was the absence of Lucas's emergency beacon. Every researcher on the glacier carried one, and Lucas had been known for his strict adherence to safety protocols. The beacon remained in its charging dock at the station, its battery full, its signal never activated. This detail troubled Lefebvre more than any other. An experienced glaciologist like Lucas would never venture onto the ice without it. The investigation team meticulously analyzed the station's data logs. Temperature readings, barometric pressure, and wind speeds all appeared normal for that time of year. No sudden weather events or seismic activities had been recorded. The glacier's movement sensors showed typical flow rates, with no unusual crevasse formations or ice falls in the vicinity. Catherine Edwards proved to be a valuable resource during these early days. She provided detailed information about Lucas's habits and routines, helping investigators build a more complete profile of his movements. He always followed the same pattern, she explained. He would work in expanding circles from the station, never more than 2 hours out without checking in. Local guides and other researchers were interviewed, building a timeline of the days leading up to Lucas's disappearance. Several reported seeing him taking measurements at various points across the glacier, always working alone but maintaining radio contact. None noticed anything unusual about his behavior or mentioned any concerns he might have expressed. Vincent Moreau's role as the last person to see the station intact placed him at the center of the investigation. His reputation in the scientific community was impeccable, his cooperation complete. He joined several search parties, offering his extensive knowledge of the glacier's terrain. Lucas was more than a colleague, he told Lefebvre. We were working on breakthrough climate research together. As the first month drew to a close, the investigation began to stall. Physical evidence remained elusive. The glacier, vast and impassive, kept its secrets. Lefebvre had seen cases like this before. The mountains could make people vanish without a trace, leaving questions that might never be answered. The case file grew thick with witness statements, technical reports, and search documentation. Yet the central question remained: how could an experienced glaciologist vanish without activating his emergency beacon, leaving no trace of his movements, no sign of accident or injury? The answer, though no one knew it then, lay frozen in the ice, preserved in a backpack that would take 25 years to emerge. Inspector Lefebvre kept the case open, but as winter approached and the glacier began its seasonal changes, she knew their window for finding immediate answers was closing. The Mont de Glace had claimed many lives over the centuries, and Lucas Edwards seemed destined to become another of its mysteries, at least for now. As winter descended on the Mont de Glace in late 1991, the search for Lucas Edwards gradually wound down. The pristine white expanses that had once held promise of answers now lay silent under fresh snow, and the case that had captivated the international scientific community began its slow slide into history. Catherine Edwards maintained an apartment in Chamonix for nearly 6 months after Lucas's disappearance. Her mornings spent watching the glacier through her window, her afternoons filled with meetings with Inspector Lefebvre and local authorities. But as spring arrived and the ice began its annual melt, even she had to acknowledge that the immediate hope of finding answers was fading. The University of Colorado Boulder established the Lucas Edwards Memorial Fellowship for Climate Research, ensuring that his academic legacy would continue. His empty office remained untouched for months, his detailed research notes and half-finished papers a testament to work left incomplete. Students would sometimes pause by his door, reading the papers and conference presentations still pinned to the bulletin board. At the research station on Mont de Glace, work continued. The sophisticated monitoring equipment Lucas had installed continued to collect data, now operated by other scientists who stepped in to continue his research. Vincent Morrow took over as lead researcher, his expertise in glacial patterns making him the natural choice to carry forward the critical climate studies. The first anniversary of Lucas's disappearance was marked by a memorial service at the base of the glacier. Catherine stood with Lucas's colleagues as they unveiled a small bronze plaque near Research Station Delta. The inscription read simply, "In memory of Dr. Lucas Edwards, who dedicated his life to understanding these ancient ice flows." The glacier holds his story. Years passed, and the case file gathered dust in Inspector Lefebvre's office. She would occasionally review it, particularly when new technologies or search methods emerged, but each review ended the same way, with more questions than answers. The mystery of the missing emergency beacon continued to trouble her, a detail that never quite fit with any accident scenario. Vincent Morrow's career flourished in the following years. His research papers on glacial retreat patterns gained international attention, and his data became increasingly influential in climate change discussions. He regularly cited Lucas's work in his publications, keeping his colleagues' name alive in scientific circles. Catherine channeled her grief into environmental law, becoming one of the leading advocates for climate change legislation. In interviews, she often spoke of how Lucas's dedication to understanding glacier systems had inspired her work. "He always said the ice holds truth," she would tell reporters. "We just have to learn how to read it." The case became something of a legend among alpine rescue teams, discussed during training sessions, as an example of how even the most experienced mountaineers could vanish without trace. The glacier itself continued its slow march downward, carrying its secrets deeper into the ice with each passing year. By the turn of the millennium, Lucas Edwards's disappearance had become one of those mysteries that seemed destined to remain unsolved. The annual memorial services grew smaller, though Catherine never missed one. She would stand at the plaque, now weathered by years of alpine storms, and gaze up at the Glacier it had taken her husband. No one could have predicted that the very climate change Lucas had studied would eventually reveal the truth. As global temperatures rose and the glacier began to retreat at unprecedented rates, it would slowly relinquish its hold on the evidence that had remained frozen in time for a quarter century. The mystery of Lucas Edwards became a cold case in every sense, filed away with other unsolved disappearances in the French Alps. But unlike many such cases, this one had not reached its end. The glacier, moving at its own inexorable pace, was already beginning the long process of revealing its secret. A secret that would eventually shatter the scientific community and bring long-delayed justice to a man who had died in pursuit of truth. The summer of 2016 brought record temperatures to the Alps, accelerating the glacier's retreat at an unprecedented rate. On July 23rd, Jean-Paul Marat was conducting his routine survey of the Mont de Glace's recession when a flash of color caught his eye, a patch of weathered blue nylon protruding from the melting ice face. Working carefully with his team, Marat excavated what turned out to be a perfectly preserved backpack, its fabric still bearing the faded label of a 1990s manufacturer. The discovery location was logged at nearly 2 kilometers from where Lucas Edwards had last been seen, in an area that had been under thick ice for decades. Inside the frozen pack, protected from the elements by layers of ice, lay a collection of papers sealed in waterproof bags, standard practice for glaciologists working in extreme conditions. The handwriting on the first page was immediately recognizable to those familiar with the case. The distinctive, precise script of Lucas Edwards. The letters, once thawed and carefully dried, revealed far more than anyone had expected. Beyond field notes and technical observations lay a detailed account of something far more disturbing. Lucas had discovered irregularities in the climate data being collected at the research station. Numbers were being altered, ice core analyses manipulated, and the modified data was being sold to major oil companies. The letters named Vincent Marat as the architect of the fraud. Lucas had documented how Marat had been systematically adjusting temperature readings and glacial retreat measurements, creating a false narrative that minimized the apparent impact of climate change. These doctored reports were worth millions to energy corporations seeking to dispute global warming evidence. Catherine Edwards, now a prominent environmental lawyer, received the call about the discovery while preparing for a climate change conference in Geneva. She arrived in Chamonix within hours, her hands trembling as she read her husband's final words. The letters included a personal note to her, explaining his intent to expose the fraud and his growing fear of confrontation with Marat. Inspector Lefebvre, nearing retirement but still haunted by the unsolved case, immediately reopened the investigation. The letters provided a clear motive for murder, transforming a presumed tragic accident into something far more sinister. The final entry, dated the morning of Lucas's disappearance, described his plan to confront Marat with evidence of the data manipulation. The scientific community reeled from the implications. Decades of research papers based on Marat's data would need to be reevaluated. The fraud had influenced climate policy discussions at the highest levels, potentially delaying crucial environmental protection measures by years. As forensics teams carefully examined the backpack's contents, they discovered more evidence preserved by the ice. A thumb drive, still functional after 25 years, contained backup copies of the original, unaltered data. Lucas had documented everything meticulously, building an irrefutable case against his colleague. The location where the backpack emerged from the ice helped investigators reconstruct Lucas's final movements. He had ventured far from his usual research areas that day, following a trail of manipulated data points. The ice had preserved not just evidence of scientific fraud, but the last steps of a man who had sacrificed everything in pursuit of truth. The glacier's retreat had finally revealed its secret, but the discovery raised as many questions as it answered. Why had Lucas ventured so far from the research station? How had Morrow managed to maintain his deception for so many years after Lucas's death? And most crucially, what exactly had happened on that September morning in 1991? The answers would come soon enough, as the weight of evidence began to crack the carefully constructed facade of one of climate science's most respected figures. Vincent Morrow, now 68 and recently retired to a villa in the south of France, was about to face a reckoning 25 years in the making. The glacier had preserved not just Lucas Edwards's final testimony, but the key to solving his murder. The discovery of Lucas Edwards's preserved backpack in 2016 set in motion a new investigation that would finally bring answers to a quarter-century-old mystery. Inspector Marie Lefebvre, though just months from retirement, approached the case with renewed vigor. Her office soon filled with both the original case files and fresh evidence from the glacier's revelation. The backpack itself became the centerpiece of a modern forensic investigation. Advanced DNA techniques, unavailable in 1991, revealed traces of contact with multiple individuals. Fiber analysis showed signs of a struggle, with torn threads matching the type of alpine gear Vincent Morrow had worn during that period. Lefebvre meticulously traced the financial connections Lucas had outlined in his letters. Bank records from the early 1990s revealed a complex web of offshore accounts linked to major oil companies. Regular deposits coincided with the release of Morrow's modified climate reports, each payment carefully disguised as consulting fees. Catherine Edwards provided crucial assistance, her years of environmental law experience helping investigators understand the technical aspects of the falsified data. She spent days in Lefebvre's office, comparing Lucas's original measurements with Morrow's published papers, building a comprehensive picture of the fraud's scope. The investigation team re-interviewed surviving members of the 1991 research station staff. Their memories, while faded, took on new significance in light of Lucas's letters. Several recalled tensions between Lucas and Morrow in the days before the disappearance, though at the time they had attributed it to normal research stress. Modern mapping technology allowed investigators to reconstruct the glacier's ice flow patterns over the past 25 years. The location where the backpack emerged matched computer models showing how a body entering the ice in 1990 would have moved through the glacier system. This data helped narrow down the likely location of Lucas's initial encounter with Morrow. The thumb drive found in the backpack proved invaluable. Despite its age, computer forensics experts recovered hundreds of files documenting the original, unaltered climate data. The difference between these readings and Morrow's published results was stark, showing a deliberate pattern of manipulation spanning years. As evidence mounted, Lefebvre focused on Morrow's movements following Lucas's disappearance. His rapid career advancement, built on the foundation of falsified research, had earned him international recognition. Yet his papers showed subtle signs of the same data manipulation Lucas had discovered, continuing long after his colleague's death. Catherine's legal expertise helped prosecutors build a case that went beyond murder. The scientific fraud had influenced environmental policies worldwide, potentially causing billions in damages through delayed climate action. Each piece of evidence strengthened not only the murder charge, but revealed the full impact of Morrow's deception. The investigation took an unexpected turn when former oil company executives, now retired, began coming forward. They described meetings with Morrow where he offered to adjust climate data to support their policy positions. The price for these adjustments had grown steadily over the years, making Morrow a wealthy man. As summer turned to autumn in 2016, Lefebvre prepared for the confrontation she had waited 25 years to conduct. The evidence was overwhelming. The preserved letters, the financial trails, the forensic analysis, and the testimony of former colleagues. The glacier had kept its secret for a quarter century, but now the truth was fully emerging, as clear as the ice that had preserved it. The final pieces fell into place when analysis of the original search patterns revealed a deliberate misdirection. Morrow, who had helped coordinate the initial search, had steered teams away from the area where Lucas had actually disappeared. The rescue effort had been compromised from the start by the very man responsible for Lucas's death. The case that had haunted the French Alps for 25 years was about to reach its conclusion. Inspector Lefebvre, in what would become her final major investigation, prepared to confront Vincent Morrow with the evidence that would finally bring justice for Lucas Edwards. The autumn morning Inspector Lefebvre arrived at Vincent Morrow's villa in Nice carried a weight of 25 years. The retired scientist, now silver-haired and weathered, opened his door to find not only the inspector but a full investigative team armed with decades of preserved evidence. Morrow's composed demeanor cracked slightly when Lefebvre placed Lucas Edwards's letters on his polished dining room table. The pages, preserved by glacial ice for a quarter century, still bore his colleague's precise handwriting. Morrow's hands trembled as he recognized the damning documentation of his fraud. "The glacier preserved everything, Vincent," Lefebvre said quietly. "Every altered data point, every falsified temperature reading, every transaction with the oil companies. But most importantly, it preserved Lucas's final words. The evidence was methodically presented. Forensic analysis of the backpack showing signs of struggle. Financial records tracking millions in payments from energy corporations. Computer models demonstrating how Morrow had deliberately misdirected the original search parties. With each revelation, Morrow's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. "He confronted you that morning, didn't he?" Lefebvre pressed. "He had discovered your manipulation of the climate data, tracked the payments, prepared his evidence. He threatened to expose everything you had built." Morrow's resistance finally broke. The confession emerged slowly at first, then in a torrent of long-suppressed guilt. He described the confrontation on the glacier, Lucas's righteous anger, the struggle near the crevasse. What had begun as an attempt to silence a whistleblower had ended in a moment of violent panic. "I offered to share the money," Morrow revealed, his voice hollow. But Lucas was unbending. He said the truth in the ice cores was more important than any amount of money. He was going to expose everything. The staged rescue attempt had been meticulously planned. Morrow had volunteered to check a series of crevasses, ensuring he would be alone with Lucas. The struggle was brief. A single push sent Lucas plummeting into the glacier's depths, his backpack torn from his shoulders in the fall. Morrow had kicked snow over the backpack, letting the glacier entomb the evidence. For hours, Morrow detailed how he had maintained the deception for decades. The falsified data had grown more sophisticated, the payments larger, his reputation more unassailable. He had built his entire career on the foundation of Lucas's death, each accolade tainted by the truth hidden in the ice. Catherine Edwards, present for the confession, maintained a stoic composure that belied her inner turmoil. 25 years of uncertainty had crystallized into a horrible clarity. Her husband had died defending scientific truth, becoming an unwitting martyr in the battle against climate change denial. Modern glacial mapping technology pinpointed the likely location of Lucas's body, still encased in ice but slowly moving with the glacier's flow. Recovery teams, led by Jean-Paul Morrow, began the delicate process of extracting remains that had been perfectly preserved by the same natural processes Lucas had dedicated his life to studying. The impact of Morrow's confession rippled through the scientific community. Decades of climate research had to be re-examined, his influential papers retracted, environmental policies reevaluated. The fraud had delayed crucial climate action for years, its full cost impossible to calculate. Vincent Maurer was arrested that same day, his villa's Mediterranean view replaced by a cell's concrete walls. The charges encompassed not only Lucas's murder but decades of scientific fraud that had influenced global environmental policy. The glacier had finally delivered its judgment, preserved in ice until time and truth could align. The case that had haunted Inspector Lefebvre for 25 years closed with a fitting symmetry. Lucas Edwards's dedication to scientific truth, long buried beneath ice and lies, had finally emerged into the light. His last testimony, preserved by the very glaciers he had studied, had exposed not only his killer but a fraud that had helped shape decades of climate policy. As Lucas Edwards's body emerged from the Mont de Glace in October 2016, the glacier seemed to be returning more than just physical remains. The recovery operation, conducted with painstaking precision by Jean-Paul Maurer's team, revealed a body preserved in remarkable detail by 25 years of glacial ice. The forensic examination confirmed what Vincent Maurer had confessed. Lucas's injuries told the story of his final moments, the defensive wounds on his hands, the impact trauma from the fall, the final position that spoke of a man who had fought until the very end. The ice had preserved every detail, as if refusing to let the truth slip away. The trial of Vincent Maurer became a global media event, drawing attention not just for the murder but for the decades of scientific fraud that had influenced climate policy worldwide. The courthouse in Chamonix filled each day with environmental activists, scientists, and journalists, all bearing witness to the unraveling of one of the most significant scientific deceptions of the modern era. Catherine Edwards took the stand during the third week of proceedings. Her testimony, delivered with quiet dignity, focused not only on her personal loss but on the broader implications of Maurer's fraud. Lucas died trying to protect something more valuable than any of us, she told the hushed courtroom. He died defending the truth written in the ice. The prosecution presented thousands of pages of evidence, falsified climate data spanning decades, financial records of payments from oil companies, and most damning of all, Lucas's preserved letters detailing the fraud he had uncovered. The defense crumbled under the weight of physical evidence and Maurer's own confession. The verdict came down on a snow-filled December morning. Vincent Maurer, once celebrated as a pioneer in climate research, received 20 years for murder and an additional decade for scientific fraud. The judge's statement emphasized not just the taking of a life, but the broader damage done to scientific integrity and environmental policy. In the aftermath of the trial, the scientific community began the enormous task of correcting the record. Hundreds of papers based on Maurer's falsified data required retraction. Climate models needed recalibration with accurate historical data. The full impact of the deception would take years to unravel. The University of Colorado Boulder transformed the Lucas Edwards Memorial Fellowship into a major research initiative focused on scientific integrity in climate studies. Catherine established a legal foundation dedicated to prosecuting environmental fraud, ensuring her husband's legacy would continue through the protection of scientific truth. Research Station Delta was renamed the Edwards Center for Glacial Studies. A new plaque replaced the old, this one telling the full story of a scientist who gave his life defending the integrity of climate research. Young researchers now begin their training by learning about Lucas's dedication to uncorrupted data and unwavering scientific principles. Inspector Lefebvre retired shortly after the trial, her final case bringing closure to the mystery that had defined much of her career. She would later write that the glacier itself had seemed determined to reveal its secret, preserving evidence until the world was ready to face the truth it contained. Lucas Edwards was laid to rest in a small ceremony overlooking the Mont de Glace. Catherine chose a simple epitaph, The ice holds truth. The glacier continues its slow retreat, a testament to the very climate change Lucas died trying to document. His final data, at last accurately reported, joins the growing body of evidence showing the rapid transformation of Earth's ice fields. The case became a watershed moment in climate science, demonstrating the crucial importance of data integrity and the potential cost of corrupting scientific truth for profit. Lucas Edwards's name, once known only to those who mourned his disappearance, now appears in textbooks as a symbol of scientific integrity in the face of powerful interests. As the years pass, the Mont de Glace continues its inexorable retreat, revealing new secrets from its icy department. But it will never yield a more important truth than the one it preserved for 25 years. The story of a scientist who gave everything to protect the integrity of his field, and whose final testimony emerged from the ice to ensure justice would eventually prevail.